Welcome to the digital podcast that explores how different organizations transform the way they create and capture value with digital technology. Good morning, Salvador. I'm
Good
really
morning.
grateful to have you on the digital podcast. Really happy that you could make it. I know you're very busy, and I'm really looking forward to having this discussion on AWS and how AWS is really acting as a digital transformation partner for a number of different clients. So maybe we can start by you introducing yourself, what you did before AWS, and what is your current role.
Sure. Thank you very much for the opportunity, panels. And so I'm Salvador Sumohano Verdeja. I work in the tech sector, particularly helping customers in industrial manufacturing and energy sectors realize the value of the cloud through partners, in particular through ISVs or independent software vendors whose software solutions serve these specific customers. And this software typically now runs in the cloud. Now, this software includes product lifecycle management software, CAD software, computer-aided software, simulation software, manufacturing execution software, just to name a few, that these industrial manufacturing customers or companies are now choosing to run in the cloud. So they can conduct the engineering, design, simulation, testing, in general, decision-making, I would say, efforts in the manufacturing life cycle, but to do it at scale and without having to maintain the hardware infrastructure that is required to run all these software solutions. And this ultimately, help them accelerate time to market and manufacture innovative, sustainable, and smarter products. So I work at AWS at Amazon Web Services, and I'm responsible for joint go-to-market with industrial ISVs in Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And I've been with AWS for the last 2 years. But prior to joining AWS, I spent around 10 years in industry, 5 of those years in Siemens, global technology provider and manufacturer, in different leadership roles, leadership positions related to digital transformation. I particularly have an academic background in manufacturing, a master's degree in advanced manufacturing technologies, and a bachelor's degree in mechatronics engineering. And I live in Manchester in the UK.
You're a local. That's great. That's fantastic.
Right.
So before we get into the various projects that you're currently engaged with your partners, it would be great maybe to spend some time discussing, you know, the recent growth in the cloud industry. I think COVID-19, we've seen it also in the educational sector. It has accelerated cloud adoption significantly, right? But it's not just COVID-19. I think it's also Gen AI. This past year, a lot of companies are thinking of ways of exploiting large language models and other types of generative AI technologies to assist them in being more productive, being more efficient in their operations, and transforming the way they work. So maybe we can start our discussion by talking a little bit about the reasons why. Give some examples from your clients as to what led them to accelerate their adoption of cloud technologies.
Yeah, you're right, Panos. So we are in the middle of a tectonic shift, we call it, to the cloud, right? And there are a couple of reasons why customers in different industries are moving so quickly and so fast. The first one is cost. So typically the conversation starts with cost. So when you have to build and manage your own data centers, you have to procure the hardware for those data centers. You have to hire and train the staff to run those data centers. And then you have to pay for all the electricity to power those data centers. With the cloud, you can avoid all of those costs and simply focus on building and managing your workloads, what we call it. And we conducted a study in 2022, actually, the Hackett Group conducted a study on behalf of AWS and found that customers can lower IT costs by an average of 20% by migrating on-premises workloads to AWS cloud. So that study was just from last year in 2021. With the cloud, the other benefit is that you don't have to lay out the capital upfront for these servers and for all the data centers where those servers will exist. Instead, what you do is you pay for it as you consume it as a variable expense. If you ever had to provision infrastructure, you either have to decide to provision on the low side, and then if it turns out you don't have enough, then you create a customer outage because you don't have enough capacity to serve all those customers. But most customers and most people don't do that. What you do instead is that you provision for the peak. So you typically over provision on your hardware and server and data center capacity. So in the cloud, the good thing is that you just provision for what you need. So if it turns out that you need less, you just give it back to the cloud provider, in this case to AWS, and stop paying for the use of that infrastructure. That variable expense is lower than what virtually every company can do on its own. And that's mainly because of the economies of scales, right? So AWS has
Hmm.
such a large scale of data centers and servers globally that we pass on to customers in the form of lower prices. So the main reason is the starter would be cost, but cost is very compelling, and almost, as I said, is the conversation started. But the number one reason that enterprises and particularly customers in manufacturing and automotive um, choose to move to the cloud is the agility and the speed in which that they can use to change their customer experience, right? So if you look at most companies as on-premise infrastructure, to get a server, if you want to procure it on-prem, typically takes 10 to 12 weeks or sometimes even longer. And then you have to build all the surrounding infrastructure, software, compute, storage, and database and analytics, machine learning, as you mentioned. In the cloud, you can just provision thousands of servers in minutes with a couple of clicks, and access, in the case of AWS, up to 200 services that you can put together and then use it, you know, to build your own applications or to run your own workloads. So again, to give you an idea of the magnitude of the benefit that you get due to this agility, in that same study, the 2022 study of the Hackett Group, they found that by migrating on-premises workloads to the AWS cloud, customers reduce time to market for new features or functionality by an average of 43%, with many
But
customers achieving a reduction of over 60%, right?
wow,
So
this is
again,
impressive.
so agility is I would say the main reason why many customers are moving into the cloud, with cost being kind of like the conversation starter. Um, in addition to cost and agility, I would mention also other benefits such as the ability to innovate faster, because you focus all your efforts on developing your application, on managing your workloads, on building new features, on innovating really than, doing what we call it the undifferentiated heavy lifting of managing the infrastructure on the server. So you can allocate people to actually do the fun, the innovative stuff rather than doing the undifferentiated heavy lifting. And the other one is the ability also to deploy globally in minutes, right? So we have regions in the AWS cloud, which is a physical location around the world, where we cluster data centers. So each group of logical data centers, we call it availability zones. And that's just to give you an idea, we have 99 availability zones globally and in 31 geographical regions. So if you want to serve customers globally in other regions, you can do it very, very easily and very quickly in the cloud, as opposed to doing it, on premises, where you would need a physical infrastructure in any other country where you would like to serve new customers.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess I mean these are well-known reasons by now to most companies, but there's still companies out there that are new to cloud migration. So thanks for summarizing those points. Very, very well taken points.
I would like to also, Panos, to give you a little bit of more specifics on the reasons why specific customers in industrial manufacturing are moving also into the cloud. We conducted another study of about 600 organizations with a primary focus on manufacturing industry. And the purpose of that study was to assess how migrating to the cloud improved operations and business results. Because, and I think that is very important, because all that I mentioned focuses a lot on the, I mentioned cost savings, agility, and so on, of organizations in general. But specifically, when you talk about manufacturing companies, they are realizing the value of the cloud. And we found four key areas of business value realization when we conducted this study. The first one was that we are helping manufacturing companies to optimize operations. So what we found is that out of the companies that migrated into the cloud, the unexpected IT downtime was reduced by 39%. And the unexpected manufacturing, which is very important, if you don't manufacture, you don't make money. The unexpected manufacturing downtime was reduced by 36% after the migration, in comparison with having your workloads on premise. So that is a big area of business value realization. The second area was improvement in supplier management. So cloud adopters, again, in that sample of 600 companies around the world, we saw an improvement of 44% of sourcing savings in the first 3 years of the migration into the cloud. The third one is the delivery of sales efficiency and customer satisfaction. So cloud services and applications improve digital collaboration with customers by 33%. And the reason for that is because we were giving more organization more relevant data to meet customer needs. And as a result, post cloud migration, customer satisfaction scores improve also by 34%. So that's kind of like the third area of business value realization after moving into the cloud. And the fourth one, and finally, is the increasing business agility and innovation, right? So all out of the organizations that migrated most of their applications, we defined in the study 10 or more applications to the cloud, we saw greatest improvement in time to market with a 36% versus the rest of the respondents in the same study. So those four areas of cloud value realization on specific industrial manufacturing customers. And if I can give you an even more specific example, one of our customers, Rivian. Rivian is an electric vehicle manufacturer that globally makes electric cars and sell them all over the place. To meet tight engineering schedules and reduce the need of physical prototypes, Rivian typically relies on advanced modeling and simulation techniques. The way they do it is that they use high compute capacity, so big computers, big servers, big supercomputers, to run their simulations that then enable the engineers to test new concepts and bring their designs to market quickly. So what happened is in 2020, so about 3 years ago, Rivian found that its on-premises R&D, information technology infrastructure, could not keep with the performance needs that the business required, right? So in fact, one of the companies of Rivian's on-premises high-performance computing clusters failed and reduced the compute capacity by half. So they were really constrained in the way they could do all these simulations. They had resource bottlenecks that affected the product lifecycle management, the simulation, as I mentioned, but also the computer-aided design. So the CAT, where the engineers can actually design the components of the car. So they began using AWS very quickly to architect an agile environment where they could run all these workloads in the cloud. As a result of using now AWS, they found that they have increased software speed by up to 66%, and they have improved the availability of compute resources in minutes, right? So something that would take perhaps months to procure,
Mhm.
a supercomputer that have just failed, they would only, take a couple of minutes to procure that type of infrastructure that they require for the business needs just in minutes with the AWS cloud. Just to give you specific examples on what the benefits of the clouds are for the industry in the industrial manufacturing customers, and to give you that specific one data point on one customer that we're helping currently.
Yeah, no,
Now,
that's thank you for that. And can I ask, in terms of the failure of the physical infrastructure, what were the reasons of that failure, and how were those reasons addressed by moving into the cloud?
so availability of physical infrastructure or low availability of physical infrastructure is actually quite common. The way in which the cloud works is that you have a high availability setup in this global infrastructure that I mentioned, our regions, our availability zones, where you are able to run the workloads in different um, um, availability zones and regions, so that if one of those physical servers fail, you can always continue running the workload in the other high availability zones that you have in the cloud. So it's a very robust, high available design, something that you wouldn't have on premise because it's quite costly, right? To have redundant hardware and to have redundant power supplies and making
Yeah.
sure that even if you fail, you actually are again online quickly. That's quite costly. With the cloud, you have that high availability at a low cost because of these economies of scale, right? So if you have multiple people and multiple companies sharing this high available infrastructure all over the place, then you are much more protected in the cloud than having that critical workload on premise.
That's a great example. Actually, recently engaged in an editorial for an academic journal, and we talked about digital resilience. And one of the characteristics of digital technology that we used as important for building digital resilience is exactly what you mentioned: redundancy, right? Redundancy of digital assets, without which you cannot be resilient to the types of failures that you were talking about, which is rewarding to hear you say that. At least we got that right. So, a big agenda in the UK and elsewhere is achieving net zero productivity, right? And efforts to decarbonization, I think, are very important, especially as we are experiencing climate change as we speak, right? I mean, even in Manchester, I mean, the weather has been ridiculously good
Yeah.
with sunny days and something that is not typical of Manchester weather. Can you talk a little bit about the efficiency of cloud technology and the efforts to help companies to minimize energy consumption, reduce greenhouse emissions? You mentioned earlier that you're working with Siemens, and I wonder whether you can tell us a little bit about that project and how you have helped them to cut down emissions and achieve or get closer to the goal of achieving net zero productivity.
Yeah, no,
You,
now I wanted to address the topic on sustainability and energy consumption and
yeah.
carbon emissions. So what we're doing at AWS and at Amazon in general. So in 2019, actually Amazon and the Global Optimism co-founded something that is called the Climate Pledge, right? Which is a commitment to reach net zero carbon emissions by 2040, right? 10 years 10 years ahead of the
Mm.
Paris. agreement. So that was an initiative that Amazon pushed globally. To date, I think there are over 400 companies across 36 countries globally that have joined this climate pledge. And as the first signatory, so Amazon is on a path to power its operations with 100% renewable energy by 2025, so 5 years ahead of its original target of 2030. Also, and perhaps that's something that not many people know, but Amazon, as a global company, is currently the world's largest corporate purchaser of renewable energy. And in 2021, we reached to 85% of renewable energy. And again, the target is 100% across our businesses, with more than 20 gigawatts of renewable energy production capacity across the entire portfolio of Amazon, right? Amazon as a company globally. Now, Amazon Web Services, AWS, and the cloud, we have always been focused on improving efficiency in every aspect of this infrastructure, this global infrastructure that I mentioned in regions and availability zones. Anything from the highly available infrastructure that powers the servers to techniques, to innovative techniques that we use to cool the data centers so they are energy efficient. Um, Also in the designs that we use for the servers to deliver those AWS services to our customers. So my point is that energy efficiency is a primary goal of the global infrastructure in which the AWS cloud runs. Now, again, another study, and you will apologize me of citing all these studies, but I think it is important to look at the data. But
Yeah.
we conducted another study from a different company. This is a 451 Research. It's a major technology research group. What it shows is very interesting. So that AWS's infrastructure is 3.6 times more energy efficient than the median US enterprise data center, right? So 3.6 times more efficient than the median US enterprise data centers. Um, um, so if you move your workloads to the AWS, you will achieve that efficiency in your IT infrastructure straight away. And that's in the US. Now, in Europe and Asia Pacific, we found that it is up to 5 times more efficient than enterprise data centers in these other locations, Europe and Asia Pacific. So approximately two-thirds of this advantage is attributable to the combination of a more energy efficient server a population, but also much higher server utilization. So we use technology that makes sure that those servers are highly utilized, because as when you see these on-premise deployments, a lot of the utilization is low. As I mentioned at the beginning, you typically go and aim for the peak. So you typically over procure, but then you have to power anyway the server as a whole.
Yeah.
Um,
So the server is being powered, but no one's using it. And also, can you say a little bit about you're using renewable energy sources to power this service?
Correct.
You're also
So
doing that?
it's both, right? So it's the energy efficiency that we use in the way that we operate these servers, as I said, because of the design, but also on the high usage and the cooling methods and all that, but also on the energy that we use to power those servers itself. And as I said, Amazon as a whole has the commitment to go 100% on renewable energy in the next couple of years. In that same study, the other good thing is that if you are a customer, right, and you want to lower your carbon footprint, a great way to do it is to migrate into the cloud, into the AWS cloud. We found that you can lower your IT workload carbon footprint by nearly 80% by migrating into the AWS cloud. and up to 96%, and that's really incredible, once AWS is powered with 100% renewable energy, which is the target that we have to meet by 2025. So you can reduce 96% your carbon footprint by migrating to the AWS cloud when we are 100% renewable energy. And at the moment, as we speak, is 80% that reduction that you can achieve. It's another
That's great.
incredible data
And
point
that's a
that
great
we.
sales pitch.
Yeah, yeah, no,
uh,
it is. But the good thing is that we conducted the study, and we actually, the study is public. You can actually download it. Whoever Google it can find it online, and
we can add it to the credits to the podcast.
absolutely.
Can you give us an example of a client that has undergone this kind of transformation and the kinds of benefits that they have achieved, maybe from manufacturing and the auto industries?
So I can certainly share with you, um, because I don't have it, because I want to be very data driven here. I do have examples of companies that have achieved those level of efficiencies. For example, Valio, which is another automotive company that have migrated into the cloud, actually using the Siemens digital industry software portfolio in the cloud, and they have achieved efficiencies. But I would like to actually bring more data on a specific customer on actually the level of achievement on energy efficiency. But definitely is something that we can share, and it is very public. The other thing that is important to mention, because you asked me, okay, how else do you achieve those great efficiencies in the cloud? So we talk about the energy that powers the servers. We talk about the design, the cooling methods, but actually also we've made a lot of efficiencies by investing in our own chips, right? In our own processors. So for example, there are EC2 compute instances. EC2 stands for elastic compute. um, so instances that which are basically servers in the cloud that are powered um, by AWS's own processors like Graviton 3, which is an ARM processor, and they use 60% less energy than comparable x86 based um, processors. There's also some innovation in the way that we design our own chips to be
Hmm.
able to reduce the carbon footprint. And the final thing I wanted to mention on that as well is, on top of everything, if you want to be a specific, because you asked me about one customer. In fact, any customer, any customer panels that migrates now into the AWS cloud, they will immediately have access to something that is called the customer carbon footprint tool, right? And what we do with that is that we are able to provide a report on what is the carbon footprint of their specific workloads in the cloud with the specific services that they are using on AWS, right? So they can go into their console once they migrate into the cloud, the customer, and they can actually see a report on what are the emissions that they are seeing by using their workloads in the cloud. So it's not only that I would come with one use case with one customer. Any customer that migrates into the cloud have access to that a carbon footprint tool, right? So it calculates the carbon emissions generated from AWS usage, and that enables customers to incorporate their carbon footprint into their own sustainability report, which is another thing that most companies are using now.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a huge market. I was recently discussing with some of my executive education students, and they were essentially, one of them was an accountant and wanted to develop this platform for monitoring carbon emissions as an auditing tool. Given that all companies now in the UK are required to report how close they are to net zero productivity. And so there's a market for this out there. I wonder, my question is the following. I wonder, how easy is it for not just the enterprise? I mean, enterprise companies, I guess, can utilize this very easily in association with their workflow management systems. But how about small and medium-sized enterprises? How about small companies that maybe are not using cloud services for other reasons, but want to get access to this tool as a way of understanding how they are doing in terms of their emissions?
Yeah, so the ability to provide a reporting immediately on what are your current emissions is definitely one great advantage, because it is very difficult to be able to measure your own emissions when you are on premise, right? And also all the efficiencies. And I would say that is only one part of the picture here on sustainability, and we call it sustainability of the cloud, right? So you migrate to the cloud, you gain all these efficiencies, and you have the ability to actually measure what your carbon footprint is based on the usage of the cloud. But that's only one pillar, if you like. The second one is really sustainability through the cloud. So once you are migrated, is what can you do, including small and medium businesses, to help achieve my sustainability outcomes and targets, right? So what we are doing in that space is that we are helping customers and companies to build and architect their applications. Either, if they want to build their applications, we provide them with the tools to do it in the cloud, or if they want to use an off-the-shelf application from one of our partners, they they can deploy it in the cloud in minutes, and they can use that application off the shelf to help them achieve those sustainability outcomes, either for doing digital carbon footprint tracking or for energy management and optimization. Coca-Cola in Turkey specifically, we help them to improve the operational performance of using AWS IoT Sitewise, which is a native service on AWS that help you connect data from the manufacturing site and then
Mm-hmm.
process that data to identify any any potential improvements. And what we found is that Coca-Cola built a robust digital analytics system in the cloud with the help of this native service that I mentioned, AWS IoT Sitewise, for its production line sanitation process in only 2 months. And that helped them to improve efficiency and reducing environmental resource usage. They calculate that on average they save 20% on energy annually, and the associated carbon emissions with that, and 9%, and they had 9% of savings on water annually as well, right? So to
Mm-hmm.
answer to your question, the benefit come in those two flavors. One, the sustainability of the cloud, all the measurements that we have taken to make our infrastructure efficient and with low carbon emissions, and giving you the transparency, but equally sustainability through the cloud by giving customers the tools in the cloud to build these applications that help them
Mm-hmm.
achieve their sustainability goals as well. And they come in a small, medium, or large enterprise as well.
That's great. Maybe let's move on to innovation, right? We've talked about efficiencies and productivities, the impact of productivity and efficiency by moving to the cloud. You mentioned earlier this company Rivian and how they're running simulations to optimize or to improve their understanding of mobility, connected cars, I guess, even the very manufacturing process of the cars. Can you talk a little bit about how cloud technologies are enabling agile ways of innovating and deriving insights from data to generate even new designs or new ways of working, new methods of approaching cloud client needs? Can you maybe expand, maybe using Rivian as an example?
Yeah. So Our approach to innovation is that we always work backwards from the customers, right? So we typically take a look at what the challenges are from our customers, and then work backwards from that. We actually have an entire innovation process, an innovation approach at AWS that talks about that, right? And we are innovating faster than any other cloud provider out there. Just to give you another, other data points, in 2011, AWS released over 80 new significant services and features. Then nearly 160 new features the following year in 2012, 280 in 2013, 516 in 2014, and so on. Just last year in 2022, we created 3,332 new features. And all that comes from working backwards from our customers and understanding what they really need in order to solve their critical problems. Particularly, as I said, me working with the industrial manufacturing customers. And we are continuously accelerating, the pace of innovation to invent entirely new technologies to customers that can use to transform the business. For example, we also in 2014, AWS pioneered something that we call serverless computing, with
Mhm.
the launch of AWS Lambda. And that lets developers run their own code without provisioning or managing servers. Also, for example, AWS built Amazon SageMaker, which is a new service for AI as well. That was around 2016, if I remember well. And that's a fully managed machine learning service that empowers everyday developers and scientists to use machine learning. Just to give you some examples on top of the custom built chips that I mentioned, and the processors, and all these innovations also in the hardware that give customers better price performance for their applications. So that is the way in which we typically approach innovation. And we like typically to hire builders, people that look at the customer experiences. They figure out how to reinvent those customer experiences, and how to apply mechanisms to then result in new innovations for our customers. So we are very much innovation focus, and you don't see that level of innovation anywhere else. As I said, you would typically work backwards from customers. In the case of Rivian, it is not a different approach. We approach the customer, look at what were the key pain points, and then work backwards from that, and help them achieve not only the outcomes that they were wanting, but also the long-term vision that they had to become a large electric vehicle manufacturer globally.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, they're using simulation to run different prototypes for their cars. And I know I've seen from your website that also Volkswagen and Toyota are using technologies to spearhead this new wave of connected cars, right? That
Right.
everyone's rushing to get into. And maybe you could mention, this process of working backwards. I understand that Amazon is creating their own solutions, but you're also building on a lot of open source software and technology, and then collaborating with third parties. Maybe you can talk a little bit about how Amazon is creating an ecosystem around cloud services, and then we can get into. I know you want to talk about the partnership program, or the different pathways, I should say. But maybe first talk a little bit about the ecosystem. The how Amazon is enabling opportunities for different parties to join, to contribute in this innovation process, and then we can move on to the partnership pathways.
Absolutely. So yeah, no, that's quite important. First of all, when you mentioned solutions, so when we approach the customer and work backwards from their needs, then we provide a solution, and that solution comes in different ways and shapes, I would say. So first, it could be AWS native services, as I mentioned. I mentioned a couple of examples: AWS SageMaker, our easy to compute instances, databases, data lakes, and so on. So native services is one part of the solution, but we can also work with partner solutions. So solutions that have been built by our ecosystem of partners that are now available on our cloud and our customers can consume and use quite quickly as well. Also, is a combination of both, or part of the solution is a framework or a recommendation that we give to the customers on how they can build their own solutions for the problems that they are trying to solve. So on that one, we have the largest and most dynamic community or ecosystem, as you mentioned, with there are millions of active customers because we serve, of course, commercial, industrial, but also end customers. So we have millions of active customers every month and more than 100,000 partners from over 150 countries. And the interesting thing is that almost 70% of those are headquartered outside the US. So that's another important thing to mention, that AWS is not only a US centric. 70% of our partners, out of those 100,000 partners that we have over 150 countries, are headquartered outside the US. So there's a real network effect, if you like, when you use AWS, right? So because customers across every industry of every size, including startups, enterprises, public sector organizations, are running every use case that you can imagine on the AWS cloud. And every AWS customer has the opportunity to benefit from all the collaboration and feedback that AWS gets from those customers. So it's really a network effect when you have that amount of people using the cloud. Now, when you look specifically about the AWS Partner Network, we call it the APN, AWS Partner Network. It is not just the thousands of systems integrators who build practices around AWS, but also ISVs, independent software vendors, or SaaS providers, software as a service providers. They will adapt the technology to work with one cloud service provider. Some will do two, perhaps a few will have the time to do three. But the common thing that you find in all of those is that they typically start with AWS because of the significant leadership position that AWS has in the market now, with this global presence and this amount of customers and active partners all over the world. So that's the reason why you see this very vibrant, if you like, collection of ISVs and SaaS providers on AWS that are moving to the cloud and want those capabilities. Examples of that, you can see Salesforce, that runs the vast majority of what they do on top of AWS, or Workday, Splunk, Informatica, Infor, Datadog, Databricks, they all run on AWS. And when you talk about the industrial and manufacturing sector, you can see Siemens Digital Industry Software, you can see GE Digital, Autodesk, PTC, Bosch Software, and so on. All these providers run their software on the AWS cloud, that then they provide solutions to customers. We have what we call it the AWS Competency Partner Program, that is defined to identify, validate, and promote AWS partners with demonstrated AWS technical expertise. So basically, what the AWS Competency Partner Program does is that validates that the partners have demonstrated that they can help customers migrate applications and legacy infrastructure to AWS. And those competency partner programs come per verticals. And we have one specific one that is for manufacturing and industrial. So we have the AWS Manufacturing and Industrial Competency Partner Program. And we structured that in solutions that support several categories, one being engineering and design, the other one being smart manufacturing, which includes robotics, worker safety solutions, productivity. The third one being smart product and services. Fourth one being enterprise solutions. And fifth one being operational technology security. Sixth one being supply chain management. Seventh, sustainability, which is what we discussed earlier. So partners that have already sustainability solutions that run in the cloud. And then finally, operational technology for an end-to-end value chain. So we have the manufacturing and industrial competency program and all these categories under which we have validated all these partners that can provide solutions for our customers. Now, you would ask, so why the partners are moving into the AWS cloud, right? And the reason is simple, right? So they with in AWS they see the ability to innovate, expand their customer reach, and also grow their business with technical, marketing, and funding resources from our side that again help them solve those specific customer challenges. We have a leadership principle in AWS and in Amazon that is called customer obsession. So when we work with partners, we also always um, are customer obsessed, right? So we are focused pretty much on solutions that really solve real customer problems. Because you might have occasions where some people would build a solution and then you're finding the problem for that solution. We don't typically work like that. We typically work from customers and then work backwards, even when we include partners on that, right? So that's kind of like the why. The way we structure our partner program is in 5 different paths. So we have the software path, we have the hardware path, we have the services path, we have the training path, and we have the distribution path. I myself particularly work with partners in the software path. So for organizations that develop software that runs on AWS and is integrated with AWS, and we help them build, market, and sell those solutions in our customers, in mutual
Mm-hmm.
customers. And we do what we call co-selling and go-to-market. So that is my main focus within AWS, targeting specifically the industrial and manufacturing customers. The
So
final
there
thing
is
I would
there
like, oh,
yeah,
sorry,
there are complementarities between what you provide and what your partners provide in relation to serving client needs that clients would not necessarily find if they were only going to your partners or if they were only going to you, right? So that
correct.
complementarity is important.
Correct. No, absolutely. And that's the main reason why they are seeing value on the AWS cloud
Mm.
panel. So the other thing and the final thing I would like to mention on the partnership, because this is something that our partners have found of much value, is the AWS Marketplace, right? So the AWS Marketplace is a curated digital catalog that help customers find, subscribe, deploy third-party software, data, and services. So it is pretty much like a app store. I was telling you earlier, right, where our customers can buy the solution from one of our partners and subscribe to that solution or deploy it and find it in this AWS marketplace. So this is a mechanism that has grown dramatically over the years. We have over 12,000 transactable listings, we call them, deployed in 25 regions. And now we have more than 2,000 ISVs, so independent software vendors, listing their solutions on AWS Marketplace. And the reason why they're doing it is because they improve their deal properties. So pretty much 80% richer deal sizes if they transact through Marketplace. They have 27% higher win rates, but they also enhance operations. So they have 40% faster sales cycles. And they also find that up to 20% of their sales pipeline can come directly from AWS originated pipeline, right? So it's
Hmm.
net new sales that they wouldn't see otherwise outside of marketplace. So those are the main reasons why they are also moving to AWS Marketplace.
All right. Well, thank you for that, Salvador. Let's. I'm conscious of time, so let's move on to the next issue that I want to discuss, which is regulatory issues. Right. I understand, and you mentioned earlier that you operate in multiple regions. You have partners in multiple regions, and you're probably faced with different regulatory and legal jurisdictions, especially given that you're dealing with data that flow across platforms in some cases. And I guess in Europe, the DMA, the Digital Markets Act, is really posing not only on you but on many different companies. But how do you manage these different jurisdictions to serve your customers, and how is it affecting the way you operate?
Yeah, so I would say that the way in which we manage the challenge of meeting customers' needs on different regulatory and legal jurisdictions across the globe really depend on on multiple factors, but the three ones that you always have to take into account are: number one, a global infrastructure footprint; number two, the ability to operate as a hybrid cloud, which is a um, requirement that many customers in strict jurisdictions have asked for; and then finally, the ability to operate with the highest security in the cloud. Those are kind of like the three
Hmm.
main considerations that you need to take in the cloud. So the first one, we've talked about it, right? So AWS has this extensive global of cloud infrastructure. Um, by the way, no other cloud provider has as many regions with multiple availability zones that are connected with by low latency, high throughput, and highly redundant networking. As I mentioned, there are 99 availability zones within 31 geographic regions globally. And we have actually announced plans of 12 more availability zones and four more AWS regions in Canada, Israel, New Zealand, and Thailand. Just to give you an idea of the scale of the global infrastructure, right? And we have the plans that over time AWS will be most of the large developed geographies with regions. And in fact, again, talking about third-party recognition, Gartner has recommended the approach that we are following on availability zones and regions for running enterprise applications that require high availability. Going back to your initial question on what happened with Rivian, that when the on-prem hardware failed. So that is the first thing. You need the presence to be able to operate globally. The second one is not only the presence, as I mentioned, but also the ability to operate as a hybrid cloud,
Hmm.
which means many customers in different jurisdictions want to consume the same public cloud offer with the same APIs, the same control panel, the same tools, and even the same hardware, but they want to do it instead of AWS regions, also in local data centers. Or let me
Hmm.
just say it properly, not only instead, but in addition to. Some
Hmm.
are more strict to do it exclusively on local data centers. Some and most customers are open to the idea to do it hybrid, where critical workloads that have the most strict regulations remain on premises, but then other less critical applications actually can be run on the public cloud. So that's the concept of the hybrid cloud. But the key concept of the hybrid cloud in AWS is that although you have the hardware on premises and local data centers, customers want the same functionality as you would have on an AWS region in the public cloud, right? So that's why we build something called Outposts, and that is what this offering precisely does, right? So you provide the customer the ability to keep the workloads on premise, due to these requirements of low latency or local data processing or data residency, but with the exact same APIs, same control panels, same tools, and the same hardware that you would see on an AWS region, right? So it's a fully managed service that offers the same services and infrastructure as what you would see in an AWS region in a public cloud, but in a virtually any data center or on premises um, facilities, right? We
Hmm.
also have
Hmm.
AWS local zones, a type of AWS infrastructure deployment that has, that places AWS compute storage, database, and other services closer to metropolitan city edges where no AWS region exists, so customers can run latency sensitive application closer to end customers. Um, and then finally, we also build what's called the Snow family, and it's a family of hardware appliances. Mainly, they come in two flavors: Snowball Edge and Snow Cone, and you can bring this hardware to the disconnected edge where there's no connectivity, or the terrain is rugged, right? So in the middle of a
Hmm.
desert,
Hmm.
just to give you an example. And that hardware allows you also to run some applications and store some data in that way. So that is the ability to operate as a hybrid cloud to then meet all these different requirements on data residency, latency, and so on. And finally, as I mentioned, is the case of security. So we offer the most flexible and secure cloud computing environment available today globally. It has been built AWS to satisfy security requirements for military, global banks, even other high sensitivity organizations. And the service offerings of AWS and the associated supply chain are vetted and accepted as secure enough for top secret workloads as well, which benefits all our customers globally. AWS uses the same secure hardware and software to build and operate each of the regions, so you have that consistency, and the infrastructure is monitored like on premises 24/7, offering multiple fault isolation capabilities to improve resilience, and allows encryption as well of all the data flowing across the network before it leaves the secured facilities where the data centers reside. As a data point, AWS supports 143 security standards and compliance certifications, helping satisfy, I would say, compliance requirements for virtually every regulatory agency around the world. And this is backed by a deep set of cloud security tools with over 300 security and compliance and governance services and key features that are embedded in the cloud that customers have access to once they have moved to the AWS cloud. So those are the three areas of consideration that you have to talk about or to think about when you are trying to meet the requirements from different jurisdictions around the world.
That's great. And in terms of challenges, I mean, you mentioned the ability to operate. You mentioned high sensitivity organizations, and I mean, we're doing research with some colleagues on the migration of banks. And I know you're not working in that industry, so you don't have to comment. But it's a high sensitivity industry in terms of the types of data that are being shared with cloud providers. And so obviously there are challenges there in terms of how you manage data on the cloud when you know for a fact that there's so many different organizations also connected to that cloud, and there's always this fear that, oh, my data is going to be stolen, my services are going to be stolen, I have to protect my customer data, and all the rest of it. You mentioned security, but I assume that a lot of the fear that's coming from customers is also something that you need to manage
Of
as part
course.
of the key challenges in helping them to transform and embrace cloud computing. But I guess that's only one. Can you mention some of the key challenges in migrating to the cloud, despite all the benefits that you
Yeah.
discussed.
No, it is true. And in terms of security, you would find out that you wouldn't be surprised actually that typically workloads are much more secured in the cloud than actually on premises installations, right? So in terms of the challenges, yeah, you're correct. So a lot of the biggest challenges for large organizations to move to the cloud aren't even technical, right? So they are about people and culture. The differences between organizations that talk about moving to the cloud and those that actually do it and are having the most success often comes down to, I would say, a few things. So the first one is the senior leadership. Uh, the senior leadership team needs to be aligned and truly committed that they want to move to the cloud, right? So it's a top-down sort of decision, and they need to be setting clear direction and expectations with the rest of the organization to get everyone on the same page and working towards the same thing. So it's easy for others to do nothing or block things if the leadership team isn't making the move a priority and building a culture of change. So it's pretty much a top-down
Mhm.
driven approach. The other one is, I would say, organizations that are trained on the cloud, on the benefits on the cloud, but also technically uncomfortable with the concepts and that are comfortable with the concepts as part of the whole process, are the ones that decide to take the steps, right? So, and we particularly train hundreds of thousands of people a year for that specific purpose, to train them on the benefits on the cloud, on the security that you can achieve by migrating into the cloud, and the higher availability that you have, and more specifically on the business value that this helps you achieve, right?
Mhm.
Sometimes we find that organizations can get paralyzed if they can't figure out how to move every workload. Um, so we also often work with organizations to do a portfolio analysis to assess each of the applications and build a plan on what to move short term, medium term, and long term, right? So in this way, you help the organizations also to get the benefits of the cloud for many of the applications more quickly, and that really helps inform how you move the rest. So that planning on, what to move first and then what to move medium and long term, it is pretty critical, and we help our customers on that front as well. Now, when you talk about industrial manufacturing customers, yeah, I would say that this term of Industry 4.0 has created a buzz, right, in the industry for several years now. But as manufacturers have started, this smart manufacturing journey, many, many, despite of, all the business value that I have mentioned before, a percentage of them, they say that they are not satisfied with the results, right? So many of them have started the journey or will soon start the journey. I think almost 70% we have found that manufacturers have started or will soon start their smart factory initiative, but only about a third of manufacturing companies, only about a third, have seen the business value to that journey, which is the business value I showed earlier and gave
Yeah.
examples of. Many of them, what you see in manufacturing, and this is, I mean, it happens in other industries, but manufacturing is very common to see it, is that many are stuck in what we call it pilot purgatory, right? Which is they feel that they are in the constant state of testing new applications or POCs, and they work well, but then they don't get anywhere, right? They are not scaling the implementations and achieving these results enterprise wide in the whole organization. Um, and the interesting thing is that over 40% of manufacturers on in this case even 50% of discrete manufacturers who feel that are in that state, in that pilot purgatory, they identify the main problem is getting all these platforms and systems to talk together, right? To
Yeah.
leverage the mutual data and value, that connectivity problem. So each standalone POC and pilot application, because just that it becomes just that, right? The standalone point solution that then is difficult to integrate into a common architecture. So we have identified also that specific blocker within manufacturing, and we are working with our customers in what we call the industrial data fabric, precisely to address that connectivity issue. And the industrial data fabric solutions that we can provide, it's a cloud-based data platform that democratizes data and converge operational and information technology networks. It basically helps customers create a data management architecture that enables, scalable, unified, and integrated mechanisms to harness the data as an asset,
Hmm.
right? And help the different applications to talk to each other. So we have identified that problem that is preventing many companies in industrial manufacturing to see the value. And we are now offering a solution that can help them actually achieve most of the benefits of the cloud and then scale those individual pilots that they have created in the organization, but at a company-wide level as well.
That's great. And I think you summarized it very well. In other discussions I had with people from industry, those are common, right? Not just in manufacturing. I think the pilot purgatory, which is a term that I will now use from now on, I'll use it. I think you can see it anywhere. They start initiatives, different parts of the organization, different business units. They develop standalone point solutions, as you say. Those solutions never integrate with the rest of the organization. They stay there for a couple of years and then they die out, right? I mean, you see it in healthcare, you see it in finance, you see it everywhere. And it does come down to leadership and culture, as you said, right? So it's interesting that you're tackling this problem by engaging with learning solutions, right? Training the people to understand the benefits and also the value proposition of the cloud as a way of almost like changing mindsets and creating opportunities that would enable leaders to take on the challenge of migrating to the cloud as opposed to falling into an infinite regress of
Yeah.
the pilot purgatory. I think you nailed it. It's exactly what I have observed in other industries. So in closing, right? I know we spent more time than you said you are allowed, but thanks for being patient with me. I think this is an interesting conversation. I know Amazon hasn't been as upfront in what they want to do with generative AI, at least in relation to Google and Microsoft that quickly jumped the gun. You are probably weighing your odds, but more recently you announced Amazon Bedrock as an API that allows clients to connect to different foundational models. And you're even building your own chips, which is impressive. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that and what's the future? What does the future bring in terms of generative AI as part of the other solutions that you are offering to your customers and your partners?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first thing to mention on that from Panos is that Amazon as a whole, as a company, applies AI to every single part of the organization. You can name the amount of use cases that we have in the different parts of the organizations, and we have been doing it for more than 20 years now, right? From Alexa to Prime Air drones to Amazon Go, there's no checkout line stores.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've seen it, but it's quite impressive. So we have been using AI to find practical solutions to different business problems. So that's the first thing I wanted to mention. So the second one is AWS specifically is, yeah, so the mission of AWS is to democratize AI, right? By offering all the AI technology to customers as AWS services. And as you well mentioned, we do that in different ways. So the first one is, look, if you are a customer that wants to build your own generative AI models, for example, or your AI models in general, we have our own chips that you can use in the AWS cloud. For example, we have the inferential chip to reduce the cost of machine learning inference, and the AWS Trainium, which is a high performance machine learning training chip designed by AWS to deliver the most cost effective machine learning training in the cloud. So you cannot find it with any other chip out there. So we have our own chips for those builders, those customers that want to build their own um, AI models, generative AI foundational models as well. We do also have partners, of course, we partnership with NVIDIA, with Intel. So you can use also those chips in the AWS cloud. So you have that flexibility to use this latest innovation of AWS for the highest performance in training on machine learning inference, but you can also use our partners' chips. You know, you can use the GPUs from NVIDIA or the other chips from Intel. So that is the first thing where we are offering our customers the tools to do AI in the cloud. So that infrastructure that will allow them to build their own models. Now, if you want to use the models that they already exist, and you talk about generative AI, and we talk about the democratizing approach that we have to generative AI, is that we offer Amazon Bedrock, which is, as you well mentioned, a service in the cloud that allows you to use different foundational models, in particular large language models that already exist there from different companies, and different AI startups like AI 21 Labs, Anthropic, Stability AI, for example. And so customers can use these off the shelf, if you like, generative AI models, and then customize them with their own data to get much better performance than, out of the box, and building their own AI applications. So they can use these models through the Amazon Bedrock offering, and then build their own applications based on generative AI. And we will be onboarding more foundational models. At the moment, we have, as I mentioned, a few large language models available in the cloud. But equally, we do have the best hardware for those builders that want to build their own model. So pretty much what I can say on the generative AI transition, we are democratizing the use of AI by offering the tools to our customers via AWS.
And that's a great strategy, isn't it? I mean, you are going to market on your own, and you're also going to market with different partners, which makes it very attractive for different customers. You're not locking them into any particular technology. So you could say you're technology agnostic, even though your competitors wouldn't say that. But you are essentially offering that option, even though obviously you want to market your own products and services. So that's great. Salvador, this has been a very interesting discussion. I've certainly learned a lot, and I do hope our listeners or the audience to this podcast has also done the same. We will be adding links to the various studies. I would be more than interested to find out more and read about the case studies that you mentioned. Some of the numbers are simply just impressive. And I think, again, it would help to educate some people about the benefits of the cloud, and especially in relation to achieving net zero productivity that we're all after. So, Salvador, thank you once again for coming on the podcast. And I do hope we get a chance to meet in person soon.
Thank you very much, Panos.